somebody who's using an ML model as a black box, they should not be able to tell whose data it was trained on. Things were very uncertain at the time. Nothing was fixed. Then my senior Aditya Srinivas, he was getting closer. So I've been working on privacy in the context of GPT. You don't have anything to hide, but are you going and publishing your credit card information on social media? No, right?
There's also a lot of catching up that regulation has to do, right? Because this is something which is pretty nascent, and maybe you as a researcher, because you've been dealing with this kind of things, like privacy in general. What are your thoughts on like kind of what kind of regulation do you think? First of all, there is regulation needed, and second thing, what kind of should I say processes are already afoot? Like maybe different organizations are thinking about it. They're investing time in sort of coming up with policy. Even MSR, maybe they're thinking about these kind of things. Can you shed some light on that, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like the policy aspect of privacy is really important, and it's become even more important for machine learning, whose capabilities and the power really, like we are in the field, and we still take time to understand it, and maybe even we don't have the best idea of what it can really do. So the people who are responsible for policy, the government officials, all these organizations within the government who are supposed to take care of this, they will have absolutely no way of going about it. How do you come up with regulations for copyright, for intellectual property, for other sorts of privacy, other lots of factors? How do you protect, say, young adults and teenagers and children from their data being exploited by all these social media companies who are kind of so that whole sociological aspect is very important. And since these are all this is like uncharted territory now, it's not, but at least in the past 10 years it has been. Even with social media, it's really important that the policy around it is well, like really granular. Well, it really understands the potential risks of these platforms or of these tools, large scale models, machine learning models. And it's really important that there's a very, very thorough understanding of the privacy risks and the privacy implications, which, like GDPR, has been a really big step forward
Right.
in that respect. There are all these rights, and then there's this very interesting right in GDPR, which is the right to be forgotten. If you've
Right.
used my data for some purpose and you're done with that purpose, you need to forget my data as well after that. So things like that. It's extremely important, and because the, these tools are going to inevitably be used for crime as well. So there will be unprecedented cases of crime cases where somebody has maybe used technology in a way that is hurting a lot of people financially or safety wise or whatever. And who is to blame in such scenarios, and how can you protect that from happening? So, we have end-to-end encryption on WhatsApp, and that is probably making the lives of a lot of criminals easier, right? Because they can communicate in an encrypted way without other people reading their messages or getting that information. So there has to definitely be like a deeper understanding, and there has to be more explicit policy in this whole information domain and how ML is used. But I guess it's not specific to ML. What I'm talking about, it's just general, like privacy and safety of people. But yeah, if you wanted to ask something more specific to ML, maybe we can talk about that too.
I'm just thinking out loud here. I'm trying to understand if, like, specifically to ML also, and in general privacy also, right? Because, like,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, like, there are certain countries or regions around the world which have spent quite some effort in sort of ensuring that privacy doesn't, it's not like a second class citizen. Like EU,
Yeah.
the EU has the GDPR set of regulations. Then there are in California, there's a specific law around it, and there are other different areas. Maybe in some countries, like, not sure in India if there is really a focus on privacy in regulation. From the news articles that I've read, the impression I get is the opposite. But privacy might be super important, even more important in a country like ours, right, where you are dealing with tons and tons of data. which is being
Yeah.
collected. And one of the things that is there is, of course, one of the examples that manifests itself in daily life is this credit card companies calling you all the time, right? And Bajaj
Yeah.
Finance, for instance, they've openly, like the I believe it's the CEO, right, recently, who basically was sort of putting it out there that we'll put out an option to for the customers for the right to forget. Until now, people are not really, bothered by this, all the, like, yeah, that's something which is in general that's there. And even in the ML space, for instance, especially with the advent of not just large language models, but easier access to compute with the growth of the cloud adoption during COVID, and also no code training and all of that, right? So a lot of people can then just, and there are startups that are popping up all around the world, not just like, so at least in big companies there might be some sort of framework to at least safeguard against this by design. Maybe because, not just because they are, like, saints, but also because regulation forces it in some regions, so they end up doing it in all of the regions. And then some companies do genuinely care about it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this is completely, like, unstructured sort of thoughts. This is
Yeah.
just coming off of this discussion. And do you know someone who's active in this space, the policy space, probably, especially from an ML standpoint,
Um,
or championing the cause of
one thing I'll say before I come to this question is that within privacy, there is like a subfield called privacy auditing. So, there's an entire pipeline. Say, for example, a bank is taking data from you, and then it's doing some data processing, and it's assessing the whatever interest rate that you should get on a house loan, or maybe it's using it in a larger database or whatever. And so. There is work that's going on where you can have something like a privacy auditing officer. You have other audits, right? You have financial audits, you have many other audits. So as an organization, if you are dealing with people's sensitive data, what can you do so that if you had like a privacy compliance officer externally who's coming to inspect this pipeline, computational pipeline, then what guarantees can you give about privacy or just confidentiality? So there is work that's being done in that at MSR as well. And that is kind of it's pretty cool because now we have, say, HTTPS. We are given a guarantee that there is a secure connection happening here, and it's using certificates to do that. It's providing certificates to us. So there is work in the similar nature where they're trying to come up with these certificates, which can at least give some baseline level of privacy audit. So I feel like this is probably uh, as people in tech, this is probably the most interesting thing because that's something we can work on. We can't really do policy changes, that's out of our domain, but coming up with some sort of protocol for certificates and auditing, which 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 does make like set a standard for privacy. That is something we can work on, like obviously along with people in policy, because they will have maybe better ideas of certain things in these regards. So that is definitely something to look into. I'm also trying to get into this more. There's another really fascinating field in this domain which is called contextual integrity, which talks about how privacy is contextual. It's not black and white. That I could tell my family and my friends that maybe this is my salary, this is my so and so financial stuff, but I wouldn't tell that to the rest of the world. I wouldn't share that publicly. I could share some things publicly, but I would not want to tell that to a certain friend or a certain family member. That is also possible, the reverse thing. So there is an upcoming field called contextual integrity, which is like a much more nuanced perspective on privacy. Um, and it's still in the grassroots level. So I think that would be something that would really interest you. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that
It's
I
actually
actually didn't know this
fascinating
term. Yeah.
because I didn't know that privacy could have so many angles to it, right?
Yeah.
So that way it's quite fascinating. And even in terms of, so you said that there are essentially, as people in technology, you could be looking at designing these kind of things, certificates and so on and so forth, to help with
Yeah.
the whole privacy. movement, so to speak. I think that it's essentially some of these institutions who have vested interests, like your financial institutions and uh, uh, I don't know, like maybe institutions who have a essentially critical, who work on critical systems. They have
Mm.
vested interests, and they're probably going to be the ones who lead the effort.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
with the rest of them might probably just follow, just because
Yeah.
they have to comply.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
this is
Yeah. Because look at the way all our credit card transactions happen, right?
yeah,
It's such a secure way of doing things, and they're
Yeah,
really leading the way in that domain. So,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
so this
the
is
only fear
actually
is that their definition of leading could be very different from what
Yeah.
we would want, right?
That's true.
So,
Yeah.
but
it's
yeah,
basically like self-interest or like the capitalistic interest might not align with the social good, the
yeah,
concept of social
absolutely.
good that you're talking about, right? And this
Yeah.
is actually a nice segue because while we were researching stuff for this, right, so there we came across something called AI for social good. What was that? Can you touch upon touch a bit upon that probably?
Yeah. Okay. So after I graduated from IIIT Hyderabad, I joined Google Research in Bangalore. And
Mm-hmm.
there I joined this team called the AI for Social Good team. And generally, the field is about using AI for real world existing current problems. Like a lot of research and a lot of AI works for solving maybe future problems or problems like long term problems, which could take years to really uh, solidify and become like a real tangible thing. You know, they could be in the conceptual space for a long time. But AI for social good is more like how can you have societal impact today or in the next 1 year or the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever. And so it's it's interesting because sometimes the things that help these social good causes with NGOs and stuff, they don't need to have AI at all. They can just be a good engineering effort, a good engineering project, well funded, certified, and with lots of checks in place. And that could be enough to help these people. But there is the beauty is that you can actually find really interesting AI research problems or generally research problems while inspecting like real world issues and real world problems that are faced by these NGOs or hospitals or whatever. And this is something that my mentor in open source, he used to tell me that people think that you come up with the research problem and then you engineer it and you build it. But the funny thing in his experience was that he would work so much on engineering because it's open source. And in that process of really like diving deep into engineering, he would come up with really interesting research problems. So that is something like I always remember that you don't have to bury your nose in books just to come up with a good research problem. You can find really interesting research problems through the engineering process as well. There's a really nice NASA example for this as well in physics. But yeah, coming back to AI for social good, what I worked with two NGOs in the healthcare and maternal and child healthcare space. One was in Mumbai, one was in Nigeria. And essentially, both the problems were resource allocation problems. So you have limited resources. What is the best, most optimal way to allocate these resources to all these people in need? Who, by the way, again, very sensitive, very private information is involved in this kind of machine learning. And at the same time, you have to be fair. You cannot just suddenly become biased to one section of society within that pool of people. You cannot just become biased to certain influences. And the other nuance in that is also identifying, like, say it's about engagement, user engagement with an app which is spreading awareness. There will be a group of people who are already highly engaged, and there will be a group of people who are completely disengaged. Neither of those groups are of interest to us because you can't really do anything about them. So you're more interested in that group which is on the fence. And so, how do you identify these people on whom the result of your interventions or phone calls or voice messages could actually sway them to do more rigorous and more better like healthcare and more doctor visits and whatever is in the medical plan. So there were some interesting nuances, and the issue with working in AI for social good, is that there is no ground truth when you're working in like, your machine learning model. You can't just classify it as a yes or a no or a cat or a dog. Here you are kind of working with all these proxy signals that do you think this intervention was successful, or was it helpful to
Hmm.
them? There are a bunch of proxy signals that you have to use to figure out whether it was useful to them or not. um, and in others like examples too within AI for social good, that yeah, you just have to really work with real world data, which can be noisy, which can be messy, and you're trying to optimize like resource constraints. You're trying to optimize allocation of resources within constraints, and yeah, and you're trying to kind of come up with signals on your own that this is probably helpful to them. And you can't do it alone because we don't have the domain expertise at all to understand that data, to understand that kind of medical literature, and just to be able to actually reach out to the people who are on the ground, calling these people up or doing the groundwork. So you have to work closely with the people in the NGO who kind of guide you step by step, that you think this is a good solution, but this is completely futile, and here is why. So that's sort of AI for social good, and I worked in that area for about a year. Yeah,
These are fascinating problems, especially the one of the things that you mentioned, that there is no ground truth. There is, and you face this even for any large scale system, right? Where there are implicit feedback loops. There's nothing which is explicit, and yeah, this is something that actually got me interested in basically big scale systems. And this is
Mhm.
really fascinating, especially when it has a societal impact, right? Because and the
Right.
example that you took of basically allocation of limited resources, especially to
Yeah,
the needy. So
yeah.
I'm curious, like what kind of techniques do you use to even start approaching this? Because and how do you sort of not let your unconscious bias kick in? Because you might have affinity to certain kinds of groups, for instance, maybe. How do you ensure that you as a researcher, or you as someone who has the control of that algorithm, right, is not tweaking it in a way which is not fair? How do you ensure fairness, in short, basically?
Okay. So I think the personal bias doesn't really come in as like as a human being. My bias will not come in because the techniques that we're looking at are in reinforcement learning and machine learning and optimization. So any biases that I might have are explicitly definitely not going to come into the picture. But the inherent bias that's there because of the data we collected, maybe it's asymmetrical data, or maybe there is the algorithm is such that it is propagating some sort of bias. It is kind of increasing the distance between two types of results, like
The margin.
if it's yeah. So um like the techniques that we use, there's this one technique in reinforcement learning which is so beautiful. It's called upper confidence bound, where UCB algorithm, where in your multi-arm bandit scenario, you're trying to pick one slot from the multiple slots, so the multi-bandits, and you kind of, using probability and statistics, you evaluate what is the probability of success, or how much is the expected reward of pulling this arm. And you have that evaluation for every single arm, and now your task is you have to pick one arm out of these 10 arms. And so mostly what happens is people will just pick the arm with the highest expected reward, because that's the arm you want to keep pulling in the slot machines. So but the beauty of the upper confidence bound algorithm is that it's not going to tell you that this is the expectation of the reward. It's going to give you an entire interval. So, maybe this one arm, maybe its true reward is much higher than the current expected reward because you only have maybe 10 samples of it. You don't have enough samples. So now the confidence interval for this specific arm is going to be huge because there are too few samples to refine the confidence bound. And so now, instead of looking at the actual expected value of the reward, you go with the upper confidence bound. So it's in
I
like
see.
a
I see.
interpretable sense, you're looking at the potential of this arm.
Hmm.
Like, what is the potential that you can reach? And so, you take that into account when you decide, like, how often am I going to pull this arm? So I always found that like really beautiful. But that's just the nuance of one algorithm. But more explicitly, after we kind of come up with some sort of solution, we do look at fairness. The beauty of fairness is you can do analysis at the output level. You can't do that with privacy. You can only do that with fairness. You look at all the outputs and you can analyze it against different types of communities, different, gender, race, age group, income group, all sorts of things. You can do that, and you can even look at intersections of these categories and see if it's favoring one category over the other. And you can modify this entire algorithm that you've worked with fairness algorithms. And there's this one field in fairness which is called individual fairness, where you don't look at gender specific fairness, race specific fairness, or any criteria that you can kind of formulate. Like it's easy for us to analyze because we have data about it. But what about fields which we cannot say that, okay, this is a gender specific bias or a race specific bias? There could still be a bias which can't be
These
so
attributes which you have
expressed
not
so
discovered yet.
analytically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or it could be
Right.
some combination of attributes, so it couldn't be analyzed that way at all.
Yeah.
So to kind of tackle that, there's this field of individual fairness where you try to come up with a fairness guarantee for each and every individual in the whole data set or something. So yeah, we use techniques like that. But I think one issue with the ML field is that often these things are like a post thought, they do everything and then they're like, oh yeah, maybe we should look at privacy, maybe we should look at fairness. No, you should have been looking at it from the start. Yeah.
And especially when you're dealing with something that's time sensitive or mission critical or life critical, then yeah, this becomes a really big
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
address.
exactly. And many things, they might be more sensitive than you imagine them to be, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
it's
this is
like
something.
when I talk to people, they'll be like, I don't have anything to hide. I don't need privacy. Okay. And that is not the point. You don't have anything to hide, but are you going and publishing your credit card information on social media? No, right? So you do have something to protect. You don't have anything to hide, but you do have something to protect. And so, yeah.
This you actually you put it in a very beautiful way, because this thing is something that comes up in many discussions. You don't have something to hide, but you have something to protect, and that the difference
Yeah.
between these two, the nuance
Yeah.
is very, very important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very nice, this one. Actually, there's
When
one thing. Yeah,
somebody calls an algorithm beautiful, you know they're really in love with that
yeah,
field.
yeah. Actually, to be honest, when you described that algorithm, that also evoked a sense of wonder, and it sort of gave me goosebumps, because I instantly related it to the concept of you're investing in someone's potential rather than their current
Yeah.
state.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
So
Yeah, exactly.
that
exactly.
notion is super interesting, right? And that's
Yeah.
that's poetic. You could say it in that way.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm
Yeah.
curious
Yeah.
about one thing, because you touched upon that, you didn't go into it. What is that physics example for NASA? Because I'm a space and app geek, so for me, I'm very, very excited about these things. What is the example that you were talking about?
Okay, so it's about this angular momentum and torque thing that
Mm-hmm.
if I were to take my phone right now and if I were to like just throw it,
Mm-hmm.
flip it or something, so you would expect it to go down like this, right? Because that is the one axis along which there's rotation. Um, but then what's also going to happen is without no matter how hard you try, it's always going to happen. It's also going to rotate like this.
In another axis,
It's
yeah.
it's always going to rotate around the second axis. And so what happened is that when these astronauts were in outer space, there was those screws which you can like handheld screws. There's like two prongs pointing up, and you can
Yeah,
rotate
yeah,
it with your hand. You know
yeah,
those, right?
yeah. Right,
So
right, right, right,
they just because you're in space, you don't need to continue to put that effort. You do it once, and it'll keep doing that on its own.
right.
So what they did was they unscrewed it, and then it started unscrewing on its own. Except that after every few seconds, it would flip entirely, and then it would flip all over
Oh, I
again.
know this. I know
So
this. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so then, because of that observation in outer space made by astronauts, which is like a whole engineering domain, they kind of came up with this discovery of why this actually happens, why the there is always the second momentum also that's always going to take place, and you can't just have like one rotation in isolation. So that was pretty interesting.
Oh, so this was in the context of
It
basically
is
fairness
almost
should not be an
metaphorical.
afterthought, right? This is
Yeah,
in
this
that
is
I
context. No, no, I was just saying
one
this.
at a
This was in
time.
the yes. So
Yeah.
this was in context of that basically the fairness thing. Right? It can't be an afterthought. There are other nuances that you have to consider
Mm,
in that context.
no, this was in the context that through engineering you can find research problems.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Like through like actually finding issues or bugs or inconsistencies in engineering, you can stumble upon research problems.
yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Abhinav.
Nothing. So I was saying this is kind of like metaphorical, right? You go for it's essentially you go for something and then you find something else, right? So in that sense, I also kind of interpreted it in the way Debayan did initially, which was
Mhm.
about fairness and those things are essentially you think of them as a consequence, but they should be a fundamental modeling of the system itself. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was thinking of it in that term. One thing I'm actually wondering apart from all this, so a constant sort of theme is you talked about a lot of work that's happening at MSR, a
Mhm.
lot of stuff that's happening in the research domain per se, and then now you also talked about the stuff that's happening at Google. um, Very often I at least personally feel that many of these companies, especially these large companies who go into like 100 different domains, um, even though there is a lot of research per se happening over there, the practical impact of that is not as large. Maybe because it's not as concentrated. I don't know, right? So if it's typically if there's a smaller company that who just starts off and picks one problem and puts all their effort in it, the impact is created more over there as opposed to many of these larger companies. Maybe that's the role that they play. That it's that they're acting as a stepping stone with other people could kind of build on top of. So I'm wondering, so this work that you did at Google, what kind of outcomes did it actually have for the people, or like was the system actually implemented at the ground level? At what kind of outcomes did it actually have?
Okay. Yeah. Maybe the first part I'll come to that later. But at Google, the NGO that I worked with in that's in Mumbai, it's called Arman, and it's mainly for maternal and infant health care. There are these workers, ASHA workers, who call uh, these pregnant women up or very young mothers up, like of mothers of infants up, and they ask them if they've, what are the symptoms? Have they taken their medicine? Have they gone for their checkup? What are they observing? Things like that. They do this for a period of almost 1.5 to 2 years.
Okay.
And so that's sort of the program. And when I joined Google, this was already in place.
Okay.
So the parts that I worked on with this NGO, I was just trying to improve some of those things.
Okay.
Some parts of the pipelines that I was trying to improve using reinforcement learning and generally machine learning and things like that. And like some sub problems, like okay, maybe you want to predict a certain new feature about the mothers. So they have published a few papers which has shown that the level of engagement that these mothers show with the ASHA workers does increase, the overall level of engagement does increase significantly when they use these reinforcement learning strategies that optimize for finding those mothers who are most likely to benefit from the program. Who are currently maybe not so much, but they are most likely to, step over the edge and really engage a lot. So that's the kind of result that they've shown. It's pretty engagement-based result,
Okay.
and it's hard to quantify what is the direct impact of that on the well-being of the mother or the infant. But I don't know if they're working on that evaluation as well. But engagement-wise, they have shown results
I
on
see.
on a pretty large scale. Yeah.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
other NGO, the one in Nigeria, there it was about vaccination, so improving the vaccination rates of that city, and the
Sorry to
optimization problem.
before
Yeah.
you kind of go ahead with the other NGO, I just want to kind of delve into the way this problem was modeled, where you're looking at people who are on the edge and who can probably flip, essentially, right? Um, shouldn't it be that those who require it the most should be addressed first, or is there possibly just an overlap that you see that those who require it are the ones who flip, uh, who are the ones who actually have an increase in engagement?
So, how do you define who requires it more? That's the challenge. You know, maybe you can say that one mother is in a more dire health condition, maybe, and maybe she requires it more. But that is just a kind of guideline that we are using in our head, like a heuristic. It's hard to say who requires it more, but the goal is that with limited resources, you're trying to like optimize for the net effect, net positive effect of that program. And so it could be that sometimes there are mothers who could really require the service, but or who could really benefit from it, but they don't have a mobile phone, or they rely on their husband's mobile phone, and he is out all day. So when those calls actually come, she doesn't have access to that
Then it's
mobile
not
phone.
there.
And this
So
is also
maybe she requires it more, but that's like a bottleneck for us to like go there,
it's also the
right?
nuance that
So it's an entry
Kritika
point.
touched
Basically, it's
upon,
an
right?
entry point. This way of solving at least gives you, um, yeah,
It's a,
some way
it's a
to model
question
the
of
problem.
ROI, right? It's basically, see, your resources are also limited, and that's what she touched upon also, right? That there are three kinds of group. One which is definitely going to go for the healthcare, like the intervention is not needed. One where no amount of intervention will help. So and you have only a limited set of like calls, budget, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Maybe human this thing, but so then you optimize for the ones which are most like on the fence.
Most
Yeah,
Yeah,
likely to
and
benefit. Yeah.
most likely to benefit from that. Correct.
Yeah.
it feels like a capitalist approach to a socialist problem, right?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
It
Like
is.
this does result in like maybe some sort of inherent unfairness, that they feel like the model might just be like, okay, this woman is more financially, she has more financial means. So most likely she will have like a mobile phone of her own. And so maybe it's better to call her. There could be inherent biases in the model like that. So that's where the debiasing comes
Right.
in. That you cannot use those criteria that okay, this woman has a higher level of education, so maybe she's more likely to follow through or something like that. So you cannot let those biases come in, and they do take care of that. There's a lot of fairness work as well, but yeah, it's like hard to really know who is in most need. That is hard. Yeah.
And
It's,
you were
yeah, it's
touching
actually a
upon
very
the
interesting
vaccination,
problem.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're touching about the vaccination, the other NGO in Nigeria also,
Yeah, the other
which
NGO.
worked on vaccination, right?
Yeah, so
Raising
there,
vaccine.
that work, it was a transport optimization problem. So the funny thing is, vaccination is free, and there's an excess of vaccination there. It's just that people are not getting vaccinated because of either lack of awareness or lack of transportation means, or like the budget to go by bus or whatever. So the program they invented was like a transportation, and there were like five different modes of transportation involved in that. And there was one more, which was awareness, so phone calls and telling people. So they might actually have the means to do the transportation, but they're just not doing it because they don't have the awareness. So that was also an interesting problem because there it was a heterogeneous optimization. We had multiple types of interventions. In the Mumbai problem, there was only one kind of intervention. So there we worked with an integer linear programming based solution, and then we kind of found greedy versions of it which would be close enough to that optimal solution but is also tractable because the integer linear program was intractable because of just the number of variables and everything. And so there it was like, okay, this we didn't, by the time I left Google, it wasn't implemented in real life because we had just published the paper, and things were getting like in the approval stage and the budget stage. But I'll follow up and find out if they implemented that. But there it was a little less like the maturity of the project. It wasn't in that much mature of a state.
These are interesting, right? Even the multiple kinds of intervention that you talked about, like
Yeah.
heterogeneous optimization, the things which we study in college and university, the real world application where you might see an optimization method actually being applied, and
Yeah.
why it matters, whether it's tractable or not, all sorts of differentiability, all of that. Yeah, it's really,
Yeah.
really nice.
So
The connect.
fundamentally, that is what uh, should be taught, right? In the sense that if you actually teach the why something is actually worth doing, automatically there is an inner motivation to learn or inner
Yeah.
motivation to really understand. So unfortunately, it's all just math, math, and
Actually,
math.
Yeah.
Uh,
no, to be honest with you, actually, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but this is one of the key learnings I've had in my career, and that is something that actually had a transformative effect on how I solve problems. Right, because once you understand why you're doing something, and then what you have to do, then the what follows. Then immediately you become so much more comfortable with uncertainty and breaking down problems. And once you have the bigger picture, and there's no
Yeah.
lack of motivation after that because you know exactly why you're trying to do it.
Yeah.
yeah,
And yeah,
not
that's
just
really, really
career, life as
important.
well in general, right?
In general, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
the why matters more
just
than
gives you a
the
drive.
what or how. I mean what
Yeah,
obviously matters, but yeah, yeah, this actually, this is something that,
Yeah. The what actually doesn't matter that much because the one thing that I've learned in academic research is that people expect you to spend way more time on the problem than on the solution. They really want you to like go as deep as possible and
yeah,
understand the
yeah,
problem. And yeah.
that's
yeah,
true.
Yeah.
yeah. So this is the thing that you were talking upon, right? You touched upon that. You explore, you explore other sides of yourself, and when you came to college, like, you found people who appreciated this other side, the studies, the art, and other things. So what was your, like, relation to art? Like, did you did you do it a lot? Did you use it as a medium of escape, or was it something like which was something, which is a part of you, irrespective? It's not an escape, but it's something which is inherent to you. Because I have seen your, like, when we were prepping for this event, I saw your page,
Yeah,
and you have an art page also, right, where you
yeah.
post quite actively also.
Yeah.
So what does art mean
Yeah.
for you?
Um, I think for me, it's the most natural thing I can be doing. Uh, you know, sometimes to do work or to do other things, even reading a book, I need to push myself a little bit. Like, okay, come on, get into that zone, do work, focus and stuff. But with art, it's like I'm not lying. There are literally have been times when I'm lying in bed and I've been lying in bed for 2 hours, 3 hours, and I'm not able to sleep because there is this idea in my head that's bugging me, and I have to get it out on paper or digital art, mostly paper, rarely digital art. And so in the 3 in the night, I just open everything, I set it up, and I start painting. And so it's kind of like this bug that I have, which uh, it just affects me like that. It infects me. And so for me, art is like a very, very natural thing. And I would do it no matter what, I don't do it to build a career out of it. I don't do it because I want to get the best at it. It's not like I'm trying to master the skill of art or something. I just pick something I like and I just do it. And sometimes it's not an external thing. Sometimes like I'll have some story or idea in my head and I'll just be like, I have to see this materialized. I have to see it in the physical form, and my mind will not be at rest until that happens. So that's what art is for me. It's like a way of expressing myself, and not necessarily myself. Like there is a lot of art that I make which has nothing to do with me or who I am, but it just I really enjoy that it can be so aesthetic, and
Yeah,
you can find like beauty in the most mundane life scenarios, and you can express that on a canvas. And so or even if it's silly stuff, like painting a frog or something. It's just to me it's cute and aesthetic and beautiful, and so I just have to do it. So it's something like that, and it makes me more energized. Like I've always felt like art has been a meditative process for me because I lose track of time. I completely lose track of time. I could sometimes I'm like it's 5 a.m. I should go to sleep now, but yeah, that's how it is for me, and it's especially when life is stressful, and there's not too much time for these hobbies and stuff. My my mind will demand it of me to make art. It's not that I'll be like, okay, now I have to take time out for art. Even I could be
Yeah.
in the middle of 10 deadlines, but if I start painting, then I can't stop it. So it's something like that. Yeah.
No, I can
That's
completely
the
relate to
best of
this.
hobbies, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
something that is, you just do it for the sheer joy of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but this art actually has the one thing that you mentioned, right? The art has a meditative effect on you. That is something
Yeah.
that, at least to me, like, because as I grew up, I used to do a lot of art, and even in college, but then I stopped.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
every single time I sat to paint something, sketch something, or even art in other forms, right? Maybe you're thinking of you penning down something. It has
Hmm.
the mindset, the change in mindset it brings clears out your mind, and you lose track of time. There's this one, like the most recent example is that, not most recent, but one of the examples that came to my mind was that there was a team outing. There's an all hands thing at some place outside, like office, and as part of it, one of the activities that was there was that you paint for, basically, like an NGO was there. They were organizing an activity. You paint so that is gifted to kids there, and they just handed like people crayons and color pencils and all of that, right? And it had been actually ages since I'd worked with that, and I just sat and I started doing it, and even after such a long time, it felt so natural, right? You keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, and I'm like, I'm coloring every small detail, fixing everything here, the shape
Yeah.
and all of that, and all of a sudden, how someone comes up to me, taps me on the shoulder, and is like, "Kya or kuch nahi karna?" And then I look up and I realize that I was at it for almost like 2.5 hours, and everyone's
Hmm.
left, and I'm the only one sitting in a lawn, and I'm like, poor them engrossed in that, completely lost track
Yeah.
of time, no, like missed lunch and all of that. Yeah, that
Yeah.
that sort of it does have that sort of an effect in
Yeah.
general. I don't
Yeah.
know why.
It's
I mean,
really
I start
powerful.
doodling. Yeah, and I start doodling like randomly, just there.
Yeah.
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 I find that any kind of creative process is very emotionally exhausting for me. I it Maybe it's just the kind of things. So usually, yeah, I mean, like you said, right? If there's something that is like extremely demanding that's going on in other parts of your life, you need some kind of outlet several times. Most times that has been writing for me. So
Hmm.
anytime I kind of go into that, at the end of it, I just feel so emotionally drained that there is a sense of clarity, there is a sense of calmness that comes with it, but at the end of it, I'm like, I just want to go to bed. I
Hmm.
should.
Yeah.
It is therapeutic more than meditative, actually, for me.
It's
Yeah.
basically like a mental workout for you, right? Like
It
it'll
is.
tire
It
you out,
is.
and then yeah.
It is. Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
Gotta
had
grab
those
something to eat and go to bed after
examples.
that.
Yeah. No, I've had such cases. Like it's not like every time that happens, but I think that happens at the time when there's a lot of turbulence in my mind. When a lot of things have been going on, and then all of a sudden something hits, that there's this
Oh, that's my
sudden
constant
streak of,
state.
yeah, clarity, right? You're like, I mean, I don't know. It's,
Yeah.
and when you realize that is when I realize that there's something like major that I'm thinking about. Like it's just become clear. Everything just became crystal clear, and I understood stuff, and it just manifests in that art form or whatever I'm trying to do, writing, or maybe even trying to solve a problem. I know it sounds a
I
little
feel
weird,
like
but
I feel like I never have those eureka kind of moments. Like I'm just like living in my imaginary cocktail of emotions and everything. And I'm like, okay, the only thing I can do is get up and do something or go for a walk or just like be engaged physically or mentally. So that's just my solution to everything. Just get up and do something.
yeah, everyone's like, human
I mean,
brain
that's what, everybody
is
is different, right?
interesting.
They're so
It's
unique, and
just
Yeah.
everyone has their own ways of approaching things, which is
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
beautiful.
I mean, yeah, the art is something that just, yeah, it's
And
transformation.
but see, one thing with you, Kritika. So I was looking at your resume when we were preparing for this whole thing, and you have like, I don't know, 10 things listed down here uh, in your extracurriculars. I gotta pull that up. Where is that?
Okay, I've
So
not looked
there's
at this, so this is completely new to me.
no, no.
Actually,
So I just
I don't remember.
first of all, I
Yeah.
think you have like some 3 4 websites, uh,
Yeah,
and
yeah, I have
at
two.
different, yeah, 2. I'm exaggerating. At different spans in time with different content, and I don't
Yeah,
know where. Maybe I closed it up. So I think there was one thing which I recall for. I think 150 paintings or something like that. You had mentioned
yeah,
that you had put them out, or you had created them or something along those lines.
yeah,
Then you're a trained Hindustani classical singer.
yeah.
Yes. I don't recall what else was there. Photography, reading, uh, crafts. I don't know. Like, first of all, where do you get the time, man?
I think I've just been very fortunate in a way that my parents really pushed me into everything possible when I was a kid.
Oh,
So,
you're one of those kids.
Yeah,
yeah, I had a
Are-
hectic childhood in a way, but it was
Hectic
fun.
childhood.
So,
Yeah, of course.
so now we
and it
know, right?
wasn't really to, sorry?
No, I'm saying now we know, right, where the thing came upon, like in the research thing also. Try different stuff and see what sticks.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I tried maybe 20, 25 different things as a kid, and then I landed
Mm.
in like three, four things that I'm interested in. And like photography, I mean, it's just an interest, it's not like I'm great at it or anything.
Mm.
Sometimes I just end up like
Yeah.
finding, like taking pictures somewhere of something beautiful, and I'm like, okay, let's just edit it and see what it looks like, or just playing with effects, shadows, and exposure, and this and that. And so that's enjoyable. Reading actually came pretty late to me. I started in like sixth standard, and then since then I've just been like, it's a love-hate relationship. Sometimes I don't read at all, and I'm like annoyed that I should be reading more. But when I do read, I just get lost in it. So yeah, it's like three, four things which to me are kind of just like my way of life, and that in no means says that I'm doing all of these things regularly all the time.
Yeah.
I just like pick and choose, projects, whatever
Yeah.
feels interesting, and yeah,
Table
that's why.
tennis. I
What?
recalled. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which one?
You
yeah,
Sorry?
table tennis.
Table
yeah.
tennis, I say.
Yeah. You played. You're a state level player or something like that. You had mentioned, or you were at some point.
No, no, no. I was never a state level player. Uh, I doubt I mentioned that anywhere, but uh, because it's not true. I've been trained by a state level player, but that's about
That's
it. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I sort of vaguely recall things from somewhere. That's about it.
He's
Awesome.
Yeah,
interpolating
Awesome.
all stuff in it. It's
yeah.
I've done my research, bro.
like-
You both have.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, there's a
Oh,
lot
we
of
are
I
things
we are
that
think
we can
I
talk
need
resuming.
about
to.
apart from the context of this podcast, but I'll just come back to this because there's like one or two more stuff that we'll just discuss those, and then we'll
Hmm.
call it a day, at least from a podcast point of view, right? So there's this thing, like he was mentioning your resume. There's this one thing about that I kept seeing in, I think, both of the websites. Probably I didn't have time to go into it, but what is open mind?
Oh, okay. My favorite topic. Okay,
Ah,
so
nice.
yeah, I was in. It was the beginning of 2020, actually ending of 2019, and I was in my fifth year. And being in Triple IT Hyderabad, it kind of becomes like a bucket list thing that I have to do something in open source at some
Ah,
point of time. And during my coursework and all, I couldn't do it. It was like that with the research was too much for me to manage. So I never applied or I never did open source during that time. But during fifth year, I had a little bit more time. So I started contributing to this open source organization, which is called OpenMind, which also works in privacy. A lot of it is differential privacy. Some of it is homomorphic encryption and a bunch of other privacy techniques. Um, so I was like, you know what? Let's apply for GSOC. And I fleshed out this long proposal. Like they had a bunch of proposals ready, but I was like, nope, not interested. I want to like pick my own project. So I wrote out this long proposal, and uh, basically by that time I had already been contributing to their org for about 6 months, and
Hmm.
some of it was engineering, some of it was a decent part of it was actually research, because there were many other people who were much better engineers than me, but I brought in this research perspective from the whole differential privacy independent studies, which they didn't have. So I could maybe educate them a little bit more that this is the better technique to use, or this mechanism is a better solution, or whatever, or how to adapt this mechanism to this new algorithm, which is not there in literature, things like that. So I was kind of contributing in the research front a little bit, and just mentorship and some social stuff and I really enjoyed that because it was the beginning of the pandemic, and that was my main source of community and interacting
Yeah.
with people and just the social aspect. I was really missing that. So I applied for GSOC, waited a month for the results to come, and the day before the results were supposed to be announced, I get like a message from the head of the organization. He's like, maybe let's just get on a call. And I said, yeah, sure. And I was terrified. And and then he's like, we're not accepting your proposal for GSOC. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I not like I was really expecting it to, because there were like two
Get
slots for
accepted.
GSOC. Yeah, so I was like, okay, what are the chances, right? And then he's like, but instead, we're going to offer you a similar role with the same stipend, which will be a research engineer role. So rather than a
I
GSOC
see.
role, you do
I
a
see.
research engineer thing. And instead of 2 months, you're going to do it for 6 months. And the pay was not even Indian GSOC pay; it was US GSOC pay. So I was just thrilled, like, okay, this is amazing. I aimed for gold and I just found diamond.
Yeah.
And so then I did like a research project with OpenMind and a few researchers at OpenMind for about a year, which was it was so unique to me because I'd never really heard of research in open source. And I was so grateful that I got this other opportunity, which showed me this whole other side of differential privacy and how you apply it to, PyTorch, and how you build like a privacy layer, and how all of this kind of translates to federated learning and things like that. And so, yeah, that was a very, very strong experience for me because that it's kind of like working at a startup, right? You could be asked to do anything if you're interested. So I got to, give talks, which is how you found that because I got all those contacts through open source who pushed me to give talks publicly. I got to write like a few pages in a chapter of a book that was published. I got to publish these papers with 20 other authors, got to interact with like researchers all around the world, Harvard. I got to interact with people in policy at the White House, at a bunch of places. And obviously, I got to do like this really interesting work, contribute to this huge GitHub repository, learn skills like Docker, which I would have never bothered to on my own. And so, um, yeah, so it was just like a very, very nice, organic, and fun time in my life where, in terms of the work, I just didn't know what was coming next, and I really enjoyed it. And yeah, that that is probably like one thing that really surprised me, that I invested in something out of interest, and it just gave me back like 200 times of what I thought I could get. So yeah, highly, I'm like in like low key in love with the open source, and especially open mind, and just the crazy things you see there, that you will meet the most experienced senior developers, who've been working for 20 years or something, and they will be so patient with you and explaining the stupidest doubts that you have. So that was just like a really nice roller coaster experience for me. Yeah.
See, this segment, just the moment I mentioned open mind and then you started talking about it, I could see like the pure joy, and
Yeah, so
like
true,
the
so true.
enthusiasm, the passion. It is like obvious. Like before this, like before the 1 hour 30 minute mark, Kritika, and then 1 hour 30 minute mark, Kritika. This is like a
I know.
completely
I
almost
think
a different
there's
person.
a flip that was switched the moment you said art, and then after that,
Switch that
open
was
mind.
flipped.
So
But
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
awesome,
this is
awesome.
really nice. Totally not
Actually,
expecting this, but
not
very
many
nice.
people. Yeah, not many people would have had such a well-rounded experience in open source because their aim is something very different, right? And
Right.
to be honest, even I have rarely found research like roles
Yeah.
as such in open source. So yeah, it's a rare
Yeah.
opportunity, and yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
You made the best
yeah.
of
This
it.
is something that I learned about now. To be honest, the research in open source bit, right?
Yeah.
And actually, like this thing is also a little close to my heart because, I think Abhinav would know this, but I had a like I also applied for GSAC when back when I was in college, and I actually got into it, and it was a little. It the project that I actually applied for was a little bit of a research kind of role, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I had to give it up because I also had to do my internship at the same time. I originally thought I would be
Ah.
able to handle it together, but
Mm.
by the midway
No,
point, I was
that's
sure that no,
impossible.
yeah. Either, but yeah, it actually was like even though the limited time that I had there, like I think a month and a half, something like that.
Yeah.
Even then, I learned quite a bit. Like interacted with the
Right.
professors there and UCLA and the PhD students there and the problem that they were trying to solve. It was related to the news domain, and yeah, it was really nice,
Yeah.
really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, like for me, it really helped me with social skills also, like I would have never been able to conduct a meeting before that. Now I know that I can, that if there are like 10 other people in the meeting, I can set an agenda, I can set a pace, I can do those things. So a lot of social skills and like networking skills and things like that really also came to me because of open source. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Awesome.
yeah. This is, I think, actually majority of what I had. Like apart from
Yeah.
this, like so actually, this one thing that so right now you're going for a PhD role, right? After
Yeah.
them, like you so after college you went MSR, then it was Google, then MSR, then now PhD, correct?
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
are you where are you going and how did you like how did you get to this opportunity? Maybe if you can touch a little bit upon that.
Okay. So I'm going for a PhD to the University of Chicago. And there's a really nice serendipitous story behind that, how that happened.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm sure you guys will enjoy that. But essentially, I started off with applying to US universities. First, the US universities have deadlines, and then Europe universities come in later. So I just applied to US universities, maybe 12 of them. And uh, the funny thing was, at that time when I was in the process of applying, I tend to post things in general on Twitter, and so I posted this tweet about how uh, like the process of applying to PhD is like it really is like is like a test of how much you believe or how much conviction you have in what you're doing, your journey, and everything. That the process of writing the statement of purpose can be pretty intense that way.
Hmm.
And just some discussion around PhD. And so I just wrote some tweets about that. And this professor from the University of Chicago, he just happened to see my tweet on Twitter. And maybe he saw my website or whatever, and he then messaged me saying that you are working in the area in which I am also working and looking to hire a lot of PhD students because many PhD students from his lab are graduating. So he said, "Why don't you apply to work for me?" And so he just said that we can just get on a call and chat. And I spoke to him over a call, and I mean, instantly there was like this chemistry that. He really appreciated sort of the fact that I'm really into art as well, and there's a reason for that, which I will come to. But just his sort of temperament and his kind of personality and my approach to research, everything really matched, and of course the area itself also matched. So he's like, okay, why don't you just apply to University of Chicago? And it wasn't in my list before. So I applied, and finally, at the end of the whole application season, I had interviewed with maybe 6 or 7 places, and I got offers from 2. So this
Hmm.
just goes to show that you could technically do everything right on paper, but you could still get rejected from everywhere. So you can publish, you can do everything, get good reference letters, but if it's not a match, it's not a match. So and that's how highly competitive a lot of these schools are. They just have too many really really good students applying. So being good is not good enough. So yeah, I got 2 offers. One was from University of Pennsylvania, and one was from University of Chicago, and both were very interesting. Even the faculty at UPenn were great, but the problem statement at University of Chicago. Okay, so the problem statement is for now. Generative AI, the advent of generative AI, it's so large scale that it's violating things like intellectual property and copyright left and right for creative people. So artists, writers, musicians, voice actors, a bunch of creative fields, people who are actually spending years and years to hone their craft and come up with a style. And this generative AI model can
Yep.
spit out a
Yep.
copy of it or an adaptation of it of that style in a matter of seconds without
Yep.
any accrediting of to the original creative people, to the original artists, or without and violating their copyright, which if you put up your art online as an artist, you do have copyright with it, you do have intellectual property to it. So it's violating all these things, and it's profiting from this art style that it has learned from these artists who are posting their artworks online. So how can you prevent these generative AI models from violating artists like this, or using their data for training for their large scale models and copying their style? So that's the work that they've done. They've worked on a paper on this cloaking tool called Glaze, which does this, where it adds this noise, and adversarially it adds noise to images that you upload online as an artist,
Ah, I
Mhm.
see.
so that it it looks the same, it feels the same to any normal person,
Not
but
human
an AI
perceptible,
model
but
will not be able
yeah.
to train successfully. It will be able to understand the scene, that there's a cat, there's a dog, whatever, it's a dark sky or whatever, but it will not be able to copy the style of the specific style of that
Yeah.
artist.
Yeah.
And so that's what they've done. And that's all. I'm just joining their generative AI group. And I'll get to work with artists, mostly visual artists, but also maybe some voice people and some writers and stuff. I'm not sure about that, but definitely visual artists. And so to me, this whole scenario, it just felt like this is for me. This opportunity is for me because of how deeply I feel about all this, and how I've invested a lot of time really understanding art and all these different mediums in art and things like that. And yeah, just the fact that I am working in privacy and adversarial attacks and security and stuff. So yeah, kind of it was like a very emotional, from the heart decision, that I have to go for this. It doesn't matter if my thesis is any good. It doesn't matter when I graduate or what kind of job I get after that. It just matters that I get to do good work and help these artists in who are like really professional artists in the artist community. So yeah,
I
that's it.
can I I can say
That's
one thing
awesome.
for sure.
That kind of
Yeah.
just ties the bow on the whole
Yeah.
thing. It's like the
Yeah,
icing on the cake.
yeah,
I
yeah,
am really happy for you because I can see that this is something
Yeah.
that again that I value this kind of a thing, right? Something जो मतलब दिल से types की just that connect
yeah,
where you're doing it like फर्क नहीं पड़ता क्या होगा आगे, we'll see, but
yeah,
it's something that you really really want to do, and
yeah,
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 that's
exactly.
nice.
Yeah,
And even the problem
yeah,
statement, this is something that I've been thinking about also,
And
and
it's
yeah,
basically
it's
at the
very nice.
intersection where you can actually create impact too, right?
Yeah,
It's at the
yeah,
right
yeah,
intersection. Several times हम जो दिल से चाहते हैं, often those things don't necessarily have that kind of impact. Whereas
yeah,
yeah.
this is right at that sweet spot.
yeah, yeah,
And massive impact in fact actually this
yeah,
is going to be
Yeah.
like this is the thing that we were discussing about like the regulation, even policing in general, and yeah. I'm
yeah.
looking
Because
forward to following
policy
you
will
about it.
also. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so
I'm looking forward
sorry.
to and
Yeah,
in general,
Well,
right?
if you find any cool artists, or if you get in touch with any cool singers, anybody, do tag us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the artists who's working with that group, I think she has worked on Doctor Strange. So it's
Hey,
pretty
Oh,
nice.
nice.
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
We'll remember this.
awesome, awesome.
So
Yes.
yeah, like I might not be tied to privacy. I'm not
Mm,
sure about that, like as a career decision, if I will stick to privacy always, but I'm just like happy to explore a bit more during the PhD and then make a more informed decision later on,
Makes sense.
Wonderful.
Makes
where
sense.
Yeah.
which direction I'll be headed in. But yeah, I have a problem committing to a field. I tend to explore a lot.
Then yeah, I like that. I am
We have seen
I
that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I resonate with that. I think that is the right thing to do actually, because once you get a well-rounded idea of the different possibilities, then you can choose like what's best for you.
Yeah.
No one can
Yeah.
choose without knowing. Like you don't know. They're the unknown unknowns, right? You don't know that. How will you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How will you choose?
Exactly. Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
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 right.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, and then like
yeah,
right now, when you're a young researcher, so you should
exactly,
explore.
exactly.
That's your job. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Exactly.
actually, there is an interview with Triple IT Hyderabad. There's like a panel interview sort of thing with like 5 women students from. You might have seen that. I
Yeah, I've
don't know.
seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
Um, I think there's also one article, which was,
Yeah.
I think it was an article of OpenMind, where they
Yeah.
had mentioned somebody else. I think you were also mentioned, and there was this
Yeah.
thing which was mentioned over there, which was very interesting. Which was, I think you were taking this graph theory class,
Yeah.
and you were probably the only woman in that class out of like
Yeah.
100 odd other people, and
Maybe there were like 25 people in the end. Yeah. Like it started off as a
okay,
class of
start off as
110, and then everybody dropped the course by ad drop,
okay.
and it was like 25 people in the end. Yeah.
Okay. And then you did feel that, you felt a little bit maybe pressure from others, or some kind of equivalent of heckling, that you are not going to score that well. Um, I mean, that's a very weird spot to be in, right? Already the sex ratio, so to speak, is like skewed, 1 is to
Yeah.
5, I guess, for most batches.
1:6.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Around that mark. And now you're like 1 is to 25, right? So, how was that for you?
So, honestly, it was good, because to me it was a challenge, you know.
Mm,
Normally I was of that mindset anyways, that
mm,
because when I started out at Reply to Hyderabad, my first semester CGPA was 7.8 something. Because I
mm,
was like, I really underestimated how much workload can be there.
mm, mm, mm,
And then I spent that 1 month in December really preparing myself mentally. And then
mm,
after that, my CGPA kind of just went up and up and up. Okay. So
mm,
I always took it as a challenge that I really have to like do well in the courses. But that one, it was like an additional motivation. And I didn't, it's not that the guys in the class were being rude or misbehaving in
mm.
any way. That was not true. They were just enjoying their own like
Okay.
intellectual,
You
there
just
is a slight
felt left
this
out.
thing also. Yeah, maybe a little bit, but that's true actually. You do feel left out because generally, if there's a group of guys talking to each other, they will not come and talk to you. It's
Mm,
maybe just like a shyness thing or something, but that
mhm,
happened a lot. And that was okay again because I was mainly like paying attention to what was happening in class. And there is like a fair bit of, competition in such classes
mm,
where you do like try to show your edge and you can see other people trying to show their edge as well, which is fine,
mhm.
which is healthy, which can be fun. So that class, I was just like in my head, I was like, okay, I'm just representing all of women here. Obviously, that's not true, but I felt that load on my shoulders. And so I was
Got
like,
it.
there is no way I cannot do well in this class. And I
Right.
did like come up with like the best grade. And I remember in the finals, there were 3 questions, and I think
Mm,
only 2 or 3 people were able to do 2 out of the 3 questions.
mm,
Everybody else mostly did like got 1 question right. And so I was really happy that I got 2 questions right. And I got that one of the questions that I got right nobody else in the class got right. So it was just it just because because of other experiences you've been there where you feel belittled. You feel like guys come and tell you that, yeah, you're just not as smart enough, or you need our help to do assignments or things like that. And obviously this is a very small fraction
You
of
have
guys.
experienced that
Yeah,
personally?
yeah,
Yeah. It
yeah,
at Triple IT?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very small fraction of people who would say that those kind of things to you, but it does happen. And it's
Hmm.
hard to forget. And so then somewhere in your head, you do feel like people might probably think that, yeah, they're just not as deserving enough of the same seats or the same
Hmm.
opportunities. And then there used to be all these talks about hiring and the female this thing, like sort of reservation in hiring
Right.
in some companies like Goldman Sachs and stuff. And so no matter what the actual truth is, these things can make you feel like, okay, uh,
Hmm.
people might not respect me for getting the same job or something,
Right.
or
Right.
doing well. Like there was this another way of looking at things, that if a girl did really well in a course, she mugged up everything. But if a guy did really well in a course, he probably put zero effort and he just got it, because he's so smart. So even
Hmm.
the same outcome had different narratives for girls and guys. So that was a little messed up. So kind of all these things accumulated in a passive way. And during that course, I felt like I really have to do well. Otherwise नाक कट जाएगी लड़कियों की यहाँ पे.
Were there friends of yours who are like, you are our representative over here?
No, 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 absolutely not.
You just took it upon yourself.
Yeah, in my head, I was like, okay, I have to do them proud, so I better
Nice,
do well.
nice, nice. And at the end of the course, you're like, the rest of the courses don't matter. This is the one. I got the
Yeah.
extra question that nobody else did. That's awesome. That's awesome. Super proud. Super proud.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so most people, like especially a lot of overachievers, in spite of all the things that they have done, they still tend to have syndrome. And whether not speaking for the crowd, even I'm just saying for myself as well, you often feel that, especially when you enter a new place or a new scenario, and you feel like, and there are a lot of highly accomplished people, even if you do well a couple of times, often you're like, uh, maybe that was just a one time thing, right? Maybe I got to like keep at it, and these guys are just way above. And to add to that whole thing, you now have this extra angle, unfortunately, of the pressure of of being a woman and having so many other
Yeah,
complications, like you talked about, right, in
nice.
terms of hiring, in terms of whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously a very very tough spot to be in. And I mean, I don't know how to, other than opening conversations to such things. It's very, very tough to like address it.
Yeah. Um, there are a few things that I can say in this area. One is that, like, so many people go through imposter syndrome, especially in research, because you are like the work that you read is by done over hundreds of years, and it's really good work. So you feel like, okay, this thing that I contributed is so tiny, maybe nobody will even read this paper. What's the point? Um, so that is definitely true. And I feel like that kind of does help unite with other people. It does help feel like that connection, that we're all in this sinking boat together.
Mhm.
So that is maybe the good part of it, that you feel connected, or there's like this emotional connect to anybody, not just women, anybody. So that's
True.
like a uniting factor in a way. And I also feel like um, that's true. You could have done many things. You could have a long resume, and you could be like, "Nahin, ye bekar hai," which I do feel sometimes. Like, yeah, maybe this was a scam. Maybe that was a scam. I was only the second author in this paper. Maybe I don't deserve credit and whatever. But I think the solution for that for me has been that the more like dedication I show in my work ethic, the more effort I put in doing
Yeah.
a job well done, that feels like the meat, the substance.
Mhm.
So it could be a failed project, it could go nowhere, have no publication, and Now that's okay. Like once you have a publication, you can say all that. You're like,
Sure.
हाँ चलता है. But when I didn't have, I was like, oh, the only thing, oh, I just want a publication. But now it feels it's okay, But I know that I did everything I could in an investigative manner, and I really pushed my own skills, and I pushed as much as possible to take the project to where it is. So I think that's what helps me with imposter syndrome. And it could be a small task also that, I just need to help someone edit a video or something. It could take me 2 hours, but if I just really put my all into it, that's the best feeling for me. So that helps. And um, but yeah, apart from that, it's it's like one thing I've learned over time is that anytime you focus on a metric of success, something's wrong. Your success cannot be defined by any metric. It cannot be by the salary or the number of papers or the name of the company or how many people are following you or anything. It has to feel a little more internal than that. Those metrics are good indicators only to others that okay, maybe they're experienced in this, and sometimes that's wrong too. Many times, PhD candidates will have many papers, but they could get rejected compared to some other PhD candidate who has only one paper, but that's a much stronger paper. And the same thing happens for faculty hiring and all that as well. So that is like one thing that I try to follow, that anytime I see myself getting attracted to a metric, I'm like, okay, take a step back. How can I, like, there is a way to game this system. There is a way to game this metric and increase your citation count to whatever. If you just keep publishing a lot of low hanging fruit papers,
Yeah.
that's not the real goal. So that thinking is helping me, I feel, with the whole imposter syndrome, that just focusing on like trying to get rid of all the metrics and just trying to do good work. So yeah, that's one thing. And what was the other thing you were talking about in this
Essentially, I mean,
context?
so
The
so
women and
essentially,
women part, right?
yeah. So often, so there's a study that I've read, right, that
Yeah,
several times women are often found to be more underconfident in several situations,
yeah,
just because they think that maybe it's a societal conditioning which has been put into them over
yeah.
generations, or what are the multiple set of factors that several of these studies analyze. But essentially, to add to this, something which is very common as imposter syndrome, you also have this added baggage, right? So dealing with multiple levels of adversity is just far more challenging.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. There is this one aspect of this challenge which maybe like men might not be able to relate to, but I still feel like eventually, there is everybody has their own different challenges. So I wouldn't say that life is so much more unfair for women or something. Uh, but the thing that I would say is like when I was in college, people used to say weird things like about this women in tech issue, and I would just take it, I would listen or I would try to defend, like, maybe that's not the way. But now, if I'm met with disrespect in any way, I just leave the conversation. So it's
Mm,
kind of like inherently, I've set the standard for myself that if I meet any person, it could be a guy, could be a girl, could be a senior person, anybody, and I feel like there is any sort of disrespect in this way, I just like kind of not interact with them in that way
mm,
anymore. Obviously, if I have to work with them, I have to work with them, but no social like interaction,
mm,
because like I'm really trying my best to provide as much value as possible. And anytime I enter a conversation, I always assume the best of intent in everyone by doubt, right? You give the benefit of the doubt to everyone.
right.
So if I find that kind of disrespect, I don't like interact with it, or I don't even
Don't
argue,
entertain
because
it.
I'm like, it's a waste of my time. And,
Yeah.
I think it's also like this spirit that maybe my work can speak for me. I don't
Yeah.
need to go out
Sure.
there and tell people that I deserve this job or I deserve this thing. I just do good work. And then eventually people whom I might be bothered by, who might say bad things about me, eventually they will not, because they'll be like, okay, she's done the work. So that's kind of the approach. I think the downside to this approach, which I've seen in other girls from my batch at Reply to Hyderabad, is we stop taking help from people. We just become self-reliant, because when we open ourselves up to taking help from our male batchmates, some of them, or seniors or something, we are putting ourselves out there to get criticized that, oh, tumhe to ye bhi nahi aata, this is so basic, or it's just
Mhm.
all these things happen. And that's like obviously not knowing, not having knowledge is a totally normal thing, but there's a respectful way to talk about it, right? You when you tell somebody you don't know something, and you're trying to educate them of something new, there's a respectful way to do it. But we didn't get that respect necessarily all the time. So most of us, we built like a very self-reliant approach where we just try to figure everything out on ourselves, or worst case, like within each other, or like we do find like, okay, there are these set of trusted people in the team or in our colleagues or friends at the office where we know they will respect women. They will not kind of look at us down like in a
Look
way
down upon.
just because we don't know something. So it becomes like that. We become really good at identifying safe people in some sense, people who will respect you. And so then we only go to them with issues. So
The
maybe
unfortunate
that's sort of the
the
situation.
unfortunate part with all this is, instead of having to focus on your work, and just enjoy that part of the journey, you're having to learn these extra skills of identifying people who are safe and not safe and
Yeah,
whatnot, right? So that's just, I don't know, like, just extra nuisance. And
yeah,
yeah, it's unfortunate.
I think that some part of it is also something that everyone has to learn at some point in life. Because to be honest with you, I've had to go through this kind of learning at my workplace, right? To identify
yeah,
that's who, like, these kind of safe people that you can say, right? But and I can't tell you like how much I relate to all the things that you said, like not just one thing, right?
yeah, yeah,
Everything. And it's just
yeah,
that
Yeah,
these things that you identify over time, that some people are just not worth your, or some issues are not worth your time,
yeah,
right? Why waste your brain
yeah,
cycles on that? Focus on things which are productive, choose your battles basically. There's always
yeah,
yeah,
stuff, there's just always noise all around. You focus on the
yeah,
ones which are productive, which will lead to a positive cycle. And there are cases where you have to work, there is no option, but then you can limit
yeah.
it to, you can be professional, you can just limit it to, that's it,
Work
that's
discussions
it.
only.
And
Yeah,
then yeah, after
yeah.
that there's no further interaction. So yeah,
yeah,
I think that, so this is a little bit, I mean, I can come off as a little entitled, you can say, probably that, but I think that people go through it, like I think everyone goes through it to
yeah.
some extent,
Everybody.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
And this
exactly. Yeah,
is, there are certain challenges, I don't mean to downplay it, there are certain challenges that women do face, which men probably don't have to think about, like something as simple as, I mean, this is not related to the workplace, but things like going out at night, right, which we take for granted.
Heading back home
And
earlier,
yeah,
and yeah,
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 so many things.
yeah. And even
yeah,
something as simple as you readily use a two-wheeler like the Rapido or Yamoto, but I didn't even think that this would be a consideration for someone, right? But then when
Yeah,
my female friends tell me about it, then that this is a concern that they have, and this is why they have to go home earlier.
yeah,
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 these things. Yeah, there is
yeah, yeah.
definitely room for improvement in certain things, right?
Yeah,
Like,
the safety issue is like a big one, like the physical safety thing. That, like, our brains are just wired to like always be alert and kind of if you sense danger, you do the first thing
yeah,
you can to protect yourself. So that thing is different. Like we would never fall asleep in a cab or a bus ride or something,
oh
something
my
like that.
god.
Correct, correct,
So
correct. Like
yeah,
something as
How many
natural as
women
which we don't
have
even think
I've
about.
heard say this? I will never fall asleep in a cab. And
mm,
so there's this one friend of mine. She used to carry a pepper spray, and anytime she had gone to carrying a pepper spray is normal, but what she had done was she had made this hole in her bag, from which the pepper spray would basically be accessible, and her hand would basically be in the bag all the time. Uh, if she's walking through some place that's even half as shady, right?
yeah,
I mean, it's just having to go through those kind of things. It's just very, very difficult for somebody who's even hearing it, right? So going through
right,
that
yeah,
itself is, it's something altogether different.
Yes.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
We just went from privacy and fairness and art to, I don't know what
Like,
not, like
yeah. I
celebrities,
don't
and then
know.
finally over here.
I don't know if we're boring you because it's been
No,
quite some
no, no,
time. I
no.
can.
It's been really fun. I'm
I,
really enjoying. Like I could
I
talk for two,
completely
three
get.
more hours until my voice goes out.
Yeah, yeah, I get. I mean, to be quite honest with you, like I think it's that kind of conversation for me also. Like I'm enjoying it, just discussing, just
Yeah.
talking, and there's so many
Actually,
different things
we
that we
have
connect on, right?
been
Yeah,
very fortunate that almost
yeah.
all the podcast guests we have had, for everybody we have been like, hey, it's going to be 1 hour or 1.5 hours, and for everybody it's like it's gone to like 2.5 hours or close to 3 hours.
No, no, no
So
one
that
as
way,
long as this. At least, at least for me, no.
So I do talk more than I thought I did.
no,
Yeah.
I mean in general, I think it's been a lot of very interesting conversations, and obviously there's that
Yeah,
whole relatability factor as well, right? So yeah, I mean it's been awesome.
Yeah.
really, really.
For me too. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other one more factor in that whole, imposter syndrome and women and underconfidence and all of that is like somewhere along the way, maybe during college, I made a choice that I'll always be bold in
Mhm.
pursuing what I want and like whatever I'm going through. So I remember there were many times there would be classes in college where I would ask the stupidest doubts in front of the whole class, and
Mhm.
I was like, it's fine. I do really stupid things with my friends, so it's not like being stupid is below me. It's just a part of me. So I'll just ask, and it's okay if people think I'm stupid. So
Yeah.
that happened, and then I post like a lot of these things which would make me seem stupid or maybe a little like just frivolous or something. I shared them on Twitter and on social media, and I just feel like that to me, that experience of having fun with something or just having the whole human experience, the whole emotional experience is more important than what I seem like to a professor or to a manager or to a colleague or to whatever. So obviously I don't share too much at the workplace because I'm like that's not really not any of their business. But whatever I feel is more fun for me, I just go for it.
Mhm.
And even in work, I try to like I remember when I applied for Google research. I asked for like I negotiated my salary, and that was just my first job, and I did get a considerable increase. So I've just been like since college, I adopted that mindset that I just have to be bold. There is no other way to live life. So that helped, I guess. Yeah.
No,
Yeah, I think that just
again,
does two things, right?
yeah.
One
Yeah.
is you always like get what you deserve because then you're really going after it, right? And
Mm.
also the second aspect of it is um, uh, you're essentially getting comfortable in your own skin,
Yeah.
and that's such a key part of maturing, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't just care so much about what somebody else is necessarily
So,
saying. You're like, this is an experience
so
that I
again,
want,
this
so
is
hence,
this is
I'm
why,
going
Yeah.
again,
after
this is
this.
something that, like, Abhinav knows the backstory for a lot of this, but I relate to this on a very, very deep level, especially this about the thing that. So one thing that I boil it down to. So one thing that you mentioned, right, the underconfidence part. Basically, it's essentially like you do what you want to do without worrying about judgment or perceived judgment of others, right?
Yeah.
And that is
Yeah.
something that took quite some time to. But once I understood that, I
Yeah.
mean, I practiced that, and that has been transformative. That you go behind
Yeah.
what you want to do, doesn't matter. Don't be worried about like being you know
Yeah.
perceived as being stupid or whatever, selfish.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a balance to it, of course, but
Yeah.
it's just like it enriches your life quite a bit. And even
Yeah.
this
It really
philosophy,
does. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
and the
it
philosophy of,
simplifies
I
things
think,
for you, right? And
it
gives you
does, it
mental
does it. you
peace,
don't
and
you don't think, like, that is something I
you
used to
don't,
overthink
yeah,
quite
you
a
don't
bit.
make a mess out of
And
your head.
simple, like, you want to do it, you do it. You
Yeah.
were sure
Yeah.
that you will know if you want to do it. You don't have to worry about all of the other things. And the one
Yeah.
thing is, whenever I'm still in doubt between two different choices, right? Because maybe one choice would take more effort, like, to get it done,
Yeah.
maybe because you have to like sort of push yourself to do it or overcome of your fear. I think the guiding philosophy, at least that I use, is minimize regrets. So you will not
Mhm.
never have like zero regrets, but choose the one
Yeah.
which you will know what you want to do. The
Yeah.
worst regret that is there in life is that what if, like, later on you look back and think that what if I wanted to do this, and only if I'd done
Yeah.
that. And I've practiced that, and that has been actually one of the things which has, I think, been very key in sort of this transformation from a shy person to someone who's like maybe come
Confident
off as
kind
a
of,
bit too
yeah.
extroverted, a bit too extroverted at times. You become comfortable in
Yeah,
your own skin because you do so many
yeah,
different things and which you wanted to do, and each thing brings, even if you fail at it, brings a story with it, right? It's a memory,
yeah, exactly.
and
Yeah,
you learn
yeah,
from it, and you understand more about yourself, what you're good at, what you're not,
yeah.
and those things.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot. Like I make a fool of myself a lot of the times, so I'm like that too, and so it's a more fun way to live, I feel, because you just
It is. It
and it's
is. It
also
is
like
inherently. It is
yeah,
inherently more prone to friction, also, though, because not everyone can easily cope with that kind of a thing, right? Because you can
Yeah.
easily come off as being sort of self-centered, or like you really don't care about anything else or anyone else. But well, in
right, yeah,
reality, it could be true that you care more about not losing this than the other
yeah,
thing. And yeah,
yeah.
and
Yeah, it's like, when I was doing my BTech that time, I used to think, okay, I have to be a student until like I do finish my PhD. And so until then, I'm supposed to have a certain lifestyle. I'm supposed to chase, like, say, citations or research or whatever. And I think because of the whole pandemic and taking this break to work, one thing that I've learned is my life is not stopping for anything. I could be doing an education, I could be, I could be going through something serious, but that doesn't mean that the rest of my life has stopped.
Yeah.
It's just whatever I'm doing, PhD or whatever, is just a part of my life. So
Mm.
I will always need that sense of adventure and that sense of joy of living and doing new things and exploring. So I'm always going to do that, no matter
yeah,
where I am. Like it's not that I'm.
Mm.
It's not like I'm not ready for enjoying my life to the fullest now. I am, and I always will be. So I have to do that too, just as much as
yeah,
research.
yeah,
And it's okay if I get like fewer publications or fewer citations. That's okay, but. Uh,
Yeah.
because I
live a
do
fuller
see a
life.
lot of people very tunnel focused, tunnel vision.
Yeah,
So to me, it feels like, okay, my own life is more precious than my academic sort of
yeah.
career or whatever. So I just try to find a balance.
I
Yeah,
mean, everyone
things
has
like
a
that.
different way of growing, right? Because that person who's focused so much in that academic, they'll grow along that dimension in life. But if
Yeah,
you're like, for
exactly.
instance, if you have explored the different aspects of it, then you grow as a well-rounded personality. And each one has pros
Yeah,
and cons, of course.
yeah,
That
exactly.
depends on the
Yeah,
person whether it suits them or not. But yeah, I
yeah,
sort of resonate with the whole like all-rounded one now. Coming from someone who was like super laser focused on academics earlier to someone who's
right.
focused a lot more on extracurriculars. And yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and doesn't mean that I'm going to be like this dopamine person just going around chasing a
not
gazillion
reckless. That doesn't
experiences.
translate to like
But
being someone
yeah,
who's
No,
reckless,
that's
yeah,
right?
what Debayan means, though. That's what Debayan means.
yeah.
They're not to be misinterpreted.
Yeah. So it's just like, yeah, you do things that bring you joy and they don't have to be
Yeah, yeah.
fancy or
Socially
popular or
validated, simply.
anything.
Socially
Yeah.
validated, simply. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
as long
It
as
doesn't have to
you're
be
happy
very
doing
true.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
And with that, we come to the end of this podcast with Kritika Prakash. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this one. We talked about differential privacy. We, of course, talked about Kritika's journey herself and what she's going to be doing up next as well. Yeah. For more such content, make sure that you subscribe to us. AI is really transforming not just our lives but also our careers. And although in the public eye, there's a lot of stuff happening around the LLMs in the GPT space, right? There are so many important ramifications which have to be considered because of the introduction of this technology, right? Privacy being one of them, right? There's also ethics and laws and regulations and so many other important aspects which are still being built, right? People and the governments and companies, all of them trying to work out how do we kind of address all the stuff which is coming around in this space. So a lot of our other podcasts are going to be along very similar sort of themes where you understand emerging technologies, understand the innovators who are at the helm of these, and also their journeys. Hopefully, you enjoyed this one. Signing off from Tech My Breath Away, this is your host, Abhinav. See you guys. Bye bye.